Okay, looks like we are live. Okay, welcome everyone. I will call the school board meeting of October 12th to order and ask that you would mute yourselves and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for that. I think we should have put up a flag video. I keep sort of forgetting about that little component of the meeting. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which includes a number of items. Minutes from the September 14th regular meeting, the September 28th meeting, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, and a second read of policy 2331. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
No.
And are we missing somebody? Okay, we're going to go through a roll call vote and then we'll discuss that. Martin.
Aye. Maria.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
And Laura is aye as well. So that motion passes. So I just, forgive me for getting started without recognizing that Julie Norton is not in the meeting. As she indicated that she wouldn't be attending this evening.
No, I just reached out, so I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, well, hopefully she's able to join us soon. So the next item on the agenda is citizen comments. Do we have citizens signed up for public comment this evening?
Yes, we have two, and they're in the attendee list. So we'll bring them over in order that they applied for comment. First up is going to be Johnny Houston, and let me bring him across.
Okay, Johnny, we can see that you're there. Can you turn your video and your microphone on, please? You're up, Johnny Houston.
Hold on, I'm trying to get it.
Okay. Okay, you have 3 minutes, sir, whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Is the timer up? I can't see it.
Yeah, Ron, could you open up Kim's video?
I have a couple times she has to click OK on her screen.
There it is.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It's a virus so deadly you need to test to see if you have it. A pandemic so serious that hospitals are willing to fire thousands of doctors and nurses during it. And a vaccine so effective that it only works unless everyone takes it. Is this real life, or are we living in a clown world? Why are student athletes who haven't taken the experimental gene therapy shot forcibly excluded from student activities? When the fact is, we know that if you have taken the shot, you can just as effectively contract and transmit the virus as someone who hasn't taken the shot. So why are we excluding anyone from anything, especially student athletes who are arguably the most healthy in society, and due to their age demographic, have the highest statistical likelihood for negative effects from COVID? How does treating these students this way make any sense? crushing their spirits when they work so hard to get to where they are. Not to mention, students were basically isolated for a year, burdening these students further by alienating and ostracizing them, piled onto whatever else is going on in their impressionable teenage lives, for a choice that affects no one else but themselves. Because as we all know now, and as I said before, getting the shot does nothing to prevent the spread of COVID. Again, children are far better off than any other age group, and none of these students should be punished for this, especially under the guise of safety. In a time when our schools and school board claim to promote the inclusivity of choices students make, no matter how peculiar those choices may appear to some. But the choice to not take the shot is met with an entirely different scenario. When a student comes out, they're treated like a hero. But as we have learned, a student athlete who declines the shot is bullied to a degree and penalized. Sent home unallowed to participate with the team when someone tests positive for COVID, even if they're not the player who tested positive, or show any symptoms of being sick. Why would we allow this? But the kids who are referred to as backs get to stay and participate with zero restrictions. Do you not see a problem with this? Don't you see how children may be coerced into putting something into their body they wouldn't otherwise want? Maybe some of you don't care. What our school district is allowing promotes a culture of discrimination, segregation, and eventually persecution, while at the same time indoctrinating students to believe people who receive the experimental gene therapy, because it's not a vaccine, are to be deserving of special privileges otherwise unobtainable to those who don't receive the shot. Oh, but it's fine though, right? Those are just the unvaxxed kids. Pay no mind to their needs. Why add more to their plate? Isn't it hard enough being a teenager already? Now I'll end with a meme, but it speaks volumes. Stop. The protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that didn't protect the protected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Brian Higgins.
Okay.
Hello, Ron, you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Laura. My name is Brian Higgins. I teach at Wenatchee High School. I just wanted to share, we took an avid field trip to Wazoo on Friday. We took about 80 students to Wazoo. And what I want to share is not how successful the field trip was, but how with a little bit of miscommunication, we actually didn't have buses available for us for about an hour and a half. And I wanted to give a shout out to Jen C at the transportation office and Rick Pepin and Ashley Wallace, who are bus drivers, who stepped up and volunteered to drive last minute and make our field trip actually happen. So it was fantastic because it just reinforces what I've come to see in 10 years here in Wenatchee, in the Wenatchee School District, which is that everyone is pretty focused on helping students make sure they have these experiences and have success. So I just wanted to share those names because those three people stepped up, put everything aside to prioritize those students, which is what we want from our district staff. And I think that they are carrying the flag for our district in making sure these students are finding successes. But I also want to give a shout out to David Vasquez, who sacrificed a good portion of his morning to tell his personal story in order to keep those 80 students who were pretty irate about not being able to leave on time for a field trip entertained until we resolved our situation. So thank you so much to Jen C, to Rick Pepin and Ashley Wallace, who provided safe, fantastic, engaging transportation for our kids, and also to David Vasquez for helping out in a moment of need. And thank you very much to Kendra Macon, who did all the communicating that morning to make it happen while we helped students stay engaged with just making good choices. So thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, Brian. It's nice to hear about some of the more normalistic things that our students are doing these days. So that's awesome. All right, next we have presentations, and I have the Wenatchee Internet Academy as our first up. And looks like Jennifer is here, and Mike.
Yes, hello, good evening, board. And thank you so much for having me come and do a little update for you on the Internet Academy. And just thank you to the board and the district for supporting WIA. You know, we started last year with 300 students in September, and we were almost 600 students at the semester. And so for us to continue on this year, we've got about 200 students this year. It really speaks to the need of our of flexibility of an online program for our district. We are removing barriers for families and meeting their needs with our WIA school and our model. So your support of that is very appreciated. So I will get to some of the good stuff here. So Wenatchee Internet Academy is an ALE school, alternative learning experience. And so we do have some additional monthly reporting duties that our teachers take on. And parents are updated on progress monthly by our teachers and the Apex program that our high school kids are involved in. So lots of home communication. I will say that in an online world, our teachers have been more communicative with parents than ever before, and it is fantastic. And parents love to have that relationship with their teachers. It really goes a long way. So our teachers really enjoy that too. So current enrollment numbers, K-5, we are about 80 students. Middle school is 53 students and high school 66 students. For K-8, our daily structure is morning Zoom classes 5 days a week. And in the afternoons, students have tasks to perform in the afternoon. So it's their iReady, their Lexia, teacher assigned tasks. But one of the things that we have added this year, which has been so fun to watch, is some new on-site, what we call electives, on-site activities that you might see as being like a PALM team. So some PE, some art, some music, things like that. That's what we would equate that to in an ALE world. So we have kids come on site a couple days a week and meet with their teachers, and they just lead students through some activities. So they've done origami, they've explored books and animation and learning about Japan, and even just recess, even just some outdoor recess time for them. But what it really does on an SEL level is it builds that relationship with the teacher. They've got a great relationship in the Zoom room, but to be able to see them in person and do some activities together is great. And also builds relationships with students at their own grade level and other grade levels as well. So that takes place here at Westside. We have got one side of a portable that we've turned into a teaching classroom. We're doing as much outdoors as we can as we enjoy this weather, but it is turning cool and crisp sooner. And then we also offer Zoom options. So if students can't make that, but they want to participate in an activity, they've got an opportunity to do that on Zoom also. For our high school students, 9th through 12th grade, they access their courses and earning their credits through the Apex Virtual Learning School. So they've got a lot of flexibility. They've got access to their classes 24/7, and the district offers support and a mentor teacher, Kevin Sellers, who also teaches out at the CAP program for Westside. He is there helping students. He's got office hours, makes appointments with students who need some support, whether it be in their classes or just with the Apex system in general. We also, K-8, have incorporated some AVID strategies daily in our schedule. So students are using grade appropriate AVID organizational strategies. We have SEL every day in the morning, and then AVID at the end of the day, where at the end of their morning, where they talk about what did we do as a learner today? What did I learn? Sharing some celebrations. And then they talk about how the students are going to structure their afternoon so that the teachers are sure what the kids need to do, the families are sure what the students need to be doing, and how they use their afternoon. We also are moving to some more fun in-person things, doing some field experiences quarterly at the end of every quarter. And those are based on their units of study in science. So for example, right now, the district 2nd and 3rd grade, they are doing field trips with salmon and rocks and minerals. So our WIA students are taking part in that as well. And then we've got a relationship with Wenatchee Valley College with exercise science and chemistry for our 4th and 5th graders to be able to go on site at Wenatchee Valley College. And kids can sign up for that and really kind of have that hands-on activity to bring those things to life as they're studying them in science. We are using grant dollars to the fullest. We are continuing to apply for grants as they come open to be able to support supplies that we would need for field experiences and for our on-site activities. We had a donation recently from our 4th grade teacher is Tracy Gelb, from his father, who's a former Wenatchee School District teacher, David Gelb, to support these on-site activities. We have a grant from Confluence Health and submitted a Woods grant recently. So we'll just keep utilizing those opportunities as they become available. And we also will be having some family events coming up. We're doing Beauty of the Bronze, as well as we'll have at the end of October, a costume and treat parade, a chance for kids to come out and see their teachers one afternoon in October. And then in December, we did this last year, a candy cane cruise, just a chance for kids to be a part of their school, have an event. It's family oriented, families are involved, and it lets us see those folks in person instead of on Zoom. And it's absolutely a wonderful treat. So that's kind of some highlights of what we have been doing, and fantastic teachers and really great support from you as the board and the district. And again, it's much appreciated.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a very uplifting presentation. Again, as with Brian Higgins, are loving hearing about, you know, some of the more regular things that our students are doing, because we hear so much about other things most of the time. So thank you so much for that. Other board members?
Jennifer, I just had a question. Out of your 200 students, do you have any students who are in special ed, have special ed needs, either with 504 plans or IEPs? And if you do, how do you meet those needs?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Yes, we do have students that are on IEPs and have needs in the classroom. Our teachers are very good at differentiating what they are doing for those students. And then in addition, we have a special education teacher that provides the services that they need in a separate Zoom time where they can meet just one-on-one with that teacher to get the supports that they need. So definitely we have that in place.
Great, thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so before WIA, I know some of our students in the district that reside in our boundaries were attending, say, K-12 Virtual Academy, OMAC Virtual Academy. Do you know if we were able to bring those kids back to enroll in our virtual academy?
That's a great question. We are able to see where students came from. We can run a report to do that. So I'm happy to have our office manager look into that and get back to you guys.
I just think it's a great thing to have in our valley, because we were choosing students out other districts that have virtual academies before we got WIA. And so there's a need for it in our community, and why not keep those tax dollars in our valley? So
absolutely. And interestingly enough, there's also a need for us in other communities. We have had many students that live, we've had kids last year from Moses Lake and from Waterville and from Ellensburg that choiced into our program virtually and could continue to do that from the cities that they lived in. So I like our model. I think it's great. And definitely great to keep folks in the Wenatchee School District.
Absolutely. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that as the WIA matures and goes from an emergency year to moving towards a more normal year, it's really encouraging to see things like on-site electives, the communication between teachers and families. You're combining both personal and remote worlds. And I think I'm not out of line in saying that a lot of school districts did not continue the alternative of remote learning. And I think it's very encouraging that Wenatchee School District, once again, is attempting to be at the not necessarily at the forefront, but doing the right thing and using creativity and initiative. And as you definitely gave a fine report, thank you very much. And thank all your staff.
Thank you. I'll pass that on. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm on different headphones, so sorry. Kind of following up on Martin's comment, I know when we were doing, and Jennifer, you may not be the perfect person to answer this question, so anyone who does know the answer, please chime in. very nice presentation though, and I'm glad to hear it's so successful. But I know when we were looking at budgeting, the WIA was not necessarily intended to be a full-time, long-term program. Certainly we've had a resurgence that necessitates it this year. It sounds like it's running really well. Has there been much discussion about how long the program may continue to run? Because we did, I know in the budget, have it sort of phasing out after a few years. But
Jennifer, I'll take this one.
thank you. That's what I figured. That's why I said sorry.
It's all yours if you want it, but I'll be happy to step into that space. Yeah, it's really a great question, Julie. It's really going to come down to student and parent choice. Do they want to continue choicing into WIA? As Jennifer just highlighted, I mean, this is a robust school that offers a really great opportunity to educate students. But at the end of the day, when we open our registration for the 22-23 school year, that will really be those defining factors in where we're going and what we're doing with it. Because as you saw in our CARES 2, in some of our CARES 3 dollars, that is because WIA came from COVID. Mm-hmm. It is one of those, somewhat of those silver linings that came out of COVID, was this incredible school that is meeting the needs of many, many students. So I think it is, like in many instances in education, is choice. How will parents and students continue to make that choice? But I would tell you, the work that Mrs. Devereaux and her staff at WIA, they're making it very compelling for these parents to making that choice for their students in this time.
So Paul, kind of dovetailing on that, and I know this is way early in the conversation, but they'll make the choice if the choice is available. What is our threshold in saying, will the choice be available? Because I know we can't do everything for everyone for all things. So
yeah, at the end of the day, it still has to make financial sense for the district. It cannot, we can't run a school that runs a deficit or at least a significant deficit. We wouldn't be doing right by the taxpayer dollars if we just propped up a school that only what X amount wanted to go to. And at the end of the day, you still need the right blend of teachers to pull this off. I mean, what we're doing, it's not easy. So anybody who thinks teaching at WIA is an easy teaching choice, it's not. It's actually the exact opposite, because oftentimes you're teaching multiple grade levels, multiple subjects, and trying to do that balance. Because overall, Jennifer, how many certified staff members do you have in the K-8 environment?
In K-8, we have 6 classroom teachers, and then we have a 0.4 EL teacher and a 0.6 special ed teacher.
So I think that helps frame, right now it works well. But if we had fewer and fewer, the financial dollars, and to be able to support teachers to be able to do the work with, there are times when you do need a number of students in your classroom to engage in conversations. And when you potentially, if you have 5-7 kids in a classroom, that's not a very rich, diverse conversation. So those will be the conversations, but we will do everything in our power to make sure that our community knows that WIA is available, and that that it is a great option for many of our students.
I think it's actually really exciting that you've added these field experiences with WIA, because I think that makes it not your typical internet academy. It makes for a richer experience. And so I think we would be hard pressed to find other internet academies that have those kinds of unique experiences. So that might make it more appealing for a lot of folks. Maybe even for folks who are choosing homeschooling, they might find that, that's a different experience that maybe their kids would want. So I think it's great that we are checking some boxes for some kids who are more drawn to online learning and providing those, like I said, the field experiences, I think is a great addition.
Yeah. What I hope is that, and we've talked about this before, is when we come out of the pandemic, the way we teach will be different. Our schools will look different and they will be different. And hopefully WIA is one of the ways that, continues on after the pandemic is no longer at the forefront of our minds, because I think it has served some students very, very, very well. Yeah. Okay, we are moving on then.
Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. The woman
Absolutely.
with no introduction needed. I love it.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Okay, next on our agenda is our CARES Act funding update.
Jeanette will take the board through CARES 1, CARES 2, and CARES 3, with probably more of a focus on 2 and 3. She'll share her screen and kind of walk you through high level and then turn it over to the board for any questions. So Jeanette, I'll hand it to you.
Sounds good. Just wanted to kind of touch on some of the points in the discussion on the memo. There's a lot of information in this little packet, so I apologize, but there is a lot of grants that are flowing through our district right now, and a lot of districts in the state and the nation. And there is a lot of question marks still outstanding for these grants. There's a lot of audit compliance. There's a lot of complexities. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. This is our plan as of what we know right now. Quite honestly, I feel like things kind of shift at least weekly. With a lot of things COVID, it's based on need, it's based on availability of things, what things we can kind of put together when. So we're trying to do the best we can. I think the biggest misnomer sometimes with the CARES funds is, these are not like the stimulus checks that everyone received as part of the acts towards the beginning of the pandemic. These are very strict federal grants that are audited. And so, we treat them with care. We don't want to get ourselves sideways with the auditors. That never ends well for anybody, and it's never a good time. So with that said, I'll continue on. So the first page here, and I apologize for the tiny font, but I didn't want this to be 20 pages. So the first page here is really just the miscellaneous grants. Like I said, we have a lot of smaller grants that are flowing through. Some are CARES related, some are not CARES related, like the FEMA, which is primarily PPE. The ECF is at the bottom, is the technology support that Ron applied for. So we've received a good portion of that. He is also applying for the second round of funding for that as well. So we also just received contact tracing and COVID testing support through the Department of Health. So those funds will be coming through as well to help support that work. So there's a lot of components, and there's more components I learn every week.
Jeanette, can I interrupt with a question?
Yeah.
So a lot of CARES funds are just funds automatically made available to the district, but it sounds like on the sheet that there's also funds that we intentionally applied for. Can you distinguish those just a little bit more?
Yes. So on this sheet specifically, the CARES for special ed, the homeless student support, those are the only ones that were, I guess you could say automatically available to us. We still had to apply and submit basically a plan, and show proof that we're planning on spending the funds appropriately. But those were the only two that had specific formulas for every district based on other grants that we already receive. All of the other grants were through some sort of application process, whether competitive or not competitive. It kind of varied, but all of the other grants were some sort of application based. Any other questions on these miscellaneous ones?
So yeah, I do have a question. So who precipitated the application for these dollars? Were there specific departments that reached out and applied? Was that done at the district office? And then who's matching up, bless you, who's matching up the dollars in and the dollars out and the services that we're providing?
Well, that is a very complicated question. So it depends on the grant who applied for it. They, like I said, Ron applied for the ECF grant, the contact tracing grant. I was the one who submitted that request. The FEMA grant was actually something that Karen Walters, the director of accounting in my office, she actually submitted that application, long, arduous application at the very beginning of the pandemic. That was one of the first things that we did. Then really after that, it kind of depended who was kind of overseeing those areas, like Jeremy, who oversees federal grants and state grants. He did the homeless student grant and the after school grant. Heritage and dual language were done by Nadia, who oversees the bilingual program and migrant program. Special education, that was done by Trisha, who oversees the special education department. As far as compliance goes, generally if it falls under somebody else's jurisdiction, like Jeremy, Nadia, and Trisha, those ones specifically, and then Ron for the technology, they would be the ones managing those grants right now. Obviously, my office is heavily involved in that. We do the claiming for the grants that require it. The only one we don't do is the technology one, ECF, Ron will be submitting that. He has all the access to do that. But all of the other grants, are overseen by the finance office, and Karen Walters specifically. She's doing a ton of legwork on keeping all of our stuff organized. We've got separate accounts for everything. We've obviously had grants in the past, and we have grants every year. And so we have an established process. Obviously, with this many influx of grants, it's becoming a lot more complicated, but we're wading our way through it.
Sounds like it's a team approach, and that's good.
It is a team approach.
Yep.
Jeanette, I have a quick question. Can you remind the board and our viewers the timeline for these grants, whether they all have the same timeline or some are longer timeframes than others?
Yes. And they all, like everything I've said, are more complicated. So FEMA basically is available for us until the state of emergency is over. So whenever that's over, that's when the FEMA eligibility would end. Special education, I believe that's a 2-year grant. That might just be a 1 year, but I believe it's a 2-year. The homeless grant is a 2-year grant. The after school program grant is a 2-year grant. I believe the heritage is a 1 year, and the dual language, I believe, is a 2 year. The COVID testing and contact tracing, that's just a 1 year commitment to my knowledge. And then ECF, we have until next June, I believe, to spend those funds and submit our reimbursement.
So these individual grants run separate from the CARES 3 timeline that has the 2024 committed, 2026 spent timeframe, or
yeah,
similar to
they all have their own timelines and deadlines, and all the CARES ones have the same, like, basically reimbursement process. FEMA and ECF are spend the money, and then they'll send it to you, that, like, based on your reimbursement whenever they decide to send money. And then the COVID testing is, funded, and then we basically show proof that we're spending the money appropriately. But all of the timelines are different. None of them are tied to the CARES 3. And the CARES 3 is actually, I believe, technically it ends in August of 2023. But then we have a 1 year carryover allowance to August of 2024. But yes, they are all unique and different and special in their own ways, just like every one of our kids. Okay, for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving on. If you guys have questions later, we can get to those. We've looked at CARES 1 quite a bit and talked about it. It's the oldest, obviously. So, the bulk of the funds were spent on technology. Most of that has been audited as of this point. That was in the prior fiscal year. So as of the end of the 2021 fiscal year, we have fully spent our CARES 1 grant. So that one is completely done. There's no funds left in that one. As you guys can see, the different kind of areas we spent. I think one thing that's different in this grant that it is not in the other two bigger CARES grants is CARES 1 required us to provide a private school equitable share, which is something that we are required to do also in a couple of our other normal federal grants. Our Title I and our special education grants also require private school equitable share contributions. And so just the first CARES required that. So that's why St. Joseph's, which I might have spelt wrong, and Cascade Christian are listed on there is due to that requirement. But like I said, none of our other COVID grants at this point require that.
Jeanette, is that also a requirement for the charter school or just private schools?
That was just private schools. Charter schools are technically public schools.
Okay. And that's just for clarification, that's just for the schools that request it.
I believe that it's the ones that we are required to do for Title I. So St. Joe's and Cascade Christian are both the schools that we provide the equitable share with Title I. So it was whichever schools fall within that. Also childcare for the first responders is on CARES 1, but is not on any of the other CARES because that's no longer a requirement. Okay, we're gonna keep moving on. CARES 2, a little bit meatier. It's a little bit bigger. So you guys will see an kind of an added column here, the amount planned. So the amount planned is basically just that. It's kind of roughly the amount that we're planning and earmarking aside to continue to support these areas. You know, some of the planned amount is flexible depending on kind of the category, and you know, maybe something falls through and we're not able to secure something, or not able to order it and it's, you know, not going to be delivered in time, or we decide to do something different. You know, those kinds of things. You know, you make a plan and you try to follow it, but we all know how life is. So, you know, that's kind of that column. Like I said, some of that is already, you know, spent in some ways. Things have been ordered. We have purchase orders and contracts in place, those kinds of things. So some of these funds are already, you know, spent in some ways, but the money just hasn't gone out the door yet. So the amount spent column is money that has gone out the door, and that will be reimbursed or already has been.
Can I ask questions, or do you want us to wait till the very end?
Go ahead and ask questions as we're going. I think that would probably be best. I want to make sure you guys are good with this.
Okay, and if you said it and I just was writing something down and didn't hear it, let me know. But in something like that technology column, you've got planned is 3,000, but you've got spent is over $1 million. Is that planned remaining because we've spent that, or is that where we originally planned only 3,000, but we've now spent, so we're going to move things around?
Yeah, so that 3,000 would be what is remaining that's planned.
And how did we come up with this particular list or itemization? Is there teams that met, or are these just based on kind of major needs? I guess there's some question of how do we prioritize with all this money, prioritize what we needed and how much?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of it with COVID has kind of come organically through conversations and needs that have come up and been communicated. So, you know, a lot of it is that, you know, WIA is listed on there, like we talked about previously, you know, adjusting the needs for social distancing and being able to, you know, accommodate more accommodate students in classrooms while maintaining distance, accommodating students at lunchtime while maintaining distance, which was also a challenge. So, you know, really just looking at, you know, what are the challenges that we need to overcome and what are ways that we can overcome those challenges. You know, especially last year, we were, you know, really, you know, wanting to make sure that we were ready for schools to open and everything. And, you know, the supply chain is not the greatest right now. So you have to, you know, kind of take what you can get and hope for the best, hope it all arrives on time and intact and all of that. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. Paul, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think it's a good description of it. It's principals, cabinet members, other directors having conversations. But the reality is, it is exactly what Jeanette said. It's first and foremost about the safety. So, and then the technology was a major piece. WIA was a major piece of that. One of those examples is like at the high school, where right now the weather's changing quickly. And currently they're able to use their outside area up front, and then kind of in the center of the school, they have a nice area for kids to go outside, but that will not be the case. So it is really sitting with the principal at the high school and saying, we've got to think differently about, because our kids don't use lockers anymore. That's a thing of my generation. Everybody uses their backpacks now. So saying those lockers are no longer useful, let's put benches in there. And those types of conversations are just around the safety, because when you go at lunchtime, you have a number of kids. We still have, our juniors and seniors have access to be able to leave the campus, but our freshmen and sophomore and some scattering of juniors and seniors still stay on campus. So it's those types of conversations. But then I would also say it's also part of our acceleration and recovery plan. You will see those linked in there as well. How do we support like the well-being project? How do we continue looking at our professional learning communities, as Jeanette will show on that other piece. So trying to make sure that we're linking the learning piece into it. And I think you'll see that even more on CARES 3, where those dollars are spent. But it's principals, it's directors, it's cabinet members, principals speaking with their teachers, really trying to make sure we're doing right. But first and foremost, it is about that safety, making sure that they had the access points to technology into a WIA school is where we headed.
Can I ask one more question? So speaking of the learning recovery and getting back in the classroom, I see you've got audio PA system improvements, but it's all planned. Just thinking, we've had the discussions, multiple meetings about how is Zoom working in the classrooms? And there's been some feedback that it's not the best option. It seems like the improvements there would help, but we haven't spent them or invested them yet.
So I'll have Ron jump here. So there definitely has been some improvement there. And when you go into a classroom with the PA system in place, one with everybody having the masks, it is audibly better. I mean, it is crazy the difference when you hear these classrooms that are all mic'd up, just from a student hearing perspective from the teachers. But Ron, you want to talk a little bit more about?
Yeah, so we were able to leverage, last year we were able to leverage and install a system in every K-8 classroom. That was with an OSPI grant that's totally separate than everything Jeanette has shared. We were awarded a competitive grant to do that, which was pretty substantial, around $400,000 to do all those classrooms. So now our next planned amount would be to outfit our high school classrooms with those same setups. And it's still planned because of the supply chain constraints. We have things that have been on order for a while and things that we're planning to install that we're still being told are 4 to 5 months away, whether that's from manufacturing or from sitting on a ship in a harbor somewhere. So we are dealing with that pretty extensively on the technology side.
I would say one other piece to that, Julie, a really good question, is also making sure that we're looking at long-term sustainability, so that we're not, so take for instance what Ron was talking about, from the audio equipment to the benches that I spoke about, both hopefully in the coming years that we have a bond at the high school that does some renovation, but we use that lens also going in. How are those benches? How will this audio equipment, if in fact we're fortunate enough to pass a bond in a few years, will those dollars still show value and not be torn out or disregarded because of it? And you'll see that in some of our structures we're thinking about, on the outside structures, making sure that those are long-term sustainable dollars, good dollars spent for things that will give us benefit for years to come, like the audio system, like the benches, like coverings for our students going outside.
Thank you.
Does that help, Julie?
That does help, yes. And I'm done.
Oh yeah, good.
I'll add one thing on that as well. So another complexity and component is installation of things. So a lot of things our own amazing classified staff can handle install on. Some of them, are a little bit more complicated. The other thing is when you're talking about that many audio and PA systems, the ones that we installed, I believe in the spring, we actually contracted that out. So it's also scheduling with contractors and everything. An added complexity again will be, now we have vaccine mandates to factor in as well for contractors that work on site. So it's not necessarily as easy anymore as picking up the phone and, somebody can rush right over. I think we all are kind of seeing that in our personal lives as well. It's a little bit more of a challenge to, get some special help on projects when we need it. Any questions on CARES 2 before I roll down? Okay, keep on moving. CARES 3, and I apologize, I think the font gets smaller as we go down because it gets more complicated and more detailed. So CARES 3 is actually kind of broken up into two sections. So part of the CARES 3 legislation requires that we spend at least 25% of our grant as or tied to learning loss. So that's why I've separated the learning loss items, or one of the reasons I've separated the learning loss items to the bottom of the page is just to kind of show that separation. Obviously, we can support learning loss in addition to the 20%, but that 20% is really that minimum requirement. And actually, on our end, it's two separate grants. So it's literally two separate buckets of money that we are managing for technically one grant. So like we talked about earlier, WIA, the continuation of that, that's actually for the 21-22 school year. So our current school year, that's the estimate there. Student support specialists, we've talked about those. I believe you guys have approved that contract previously for the elementary, supporting there. There's a lot of items on this list, supporting the certified staff with up to 2 days to work on their Canvas pages, creating homework packets, asynchronous learning, those kinds of things to support students who are out due to COVID, either exposure quarantine or a positive case. So that's included. Oh boy, there's a lot on here. Professional development, PLC work, which is a 3-year partnership with Solution Tree that's going to provide training and on-site coaching to support teacher collective efficacy, which good thing I'm not in teaching and learning because that's hard for me to say. But basically it's really just, building those teams at the school sites and, making sure that we're supporting students as much as we can across all grade levels and teaching the same content and things like that. Chromebooks, obviously technology is going to continue to be a need. We are going to try to leverage the funds as much as we can and as long as we can to continue to support that initiative now that we have the number of devices in our district that we do. We know that these funds won't be around forever, so we don't want to bank on that, but we do want to leverage them as long as we can. Network upgrades, another thing that you guys have previously approved. So we're receiving also reimbursement through an E-rate funding for the same work. So we're able to capitalize on that, which is nice. I included PPE in here as well, just an estimate. Like I said, I don't know how long the FEMA funding will last. It depends on how long the state of emergency goes. And one of the challenges with FEMA has been the rules are constantly changing. We submit a reimbursement based on one set of rules, and then they change the rules and retroactive it all the way back. So we have to resubmit new thing for new things, and it's been interesting. So Let me think here. Also, one of the new things that's eligible in CARES 3 is your ability to actually support some more like construction type projects. So really supporting airflow and air quality. So we're looking into replacement of HVAC systems in our older school sites and our older systems. Those would be prioritized and, based on need, obviously, and also, really, again, looking at that airflow and air quality piece. So it's not necessarily the air conditioning is broken, which is a problem, or the heating is broken, which is a problem. It's air quality and airflow. So that's kind of where we're looking at that. Also looking into the option of doing some more long-term outdoor eating and learning spaces at some of the sites. That would be contracted out more than likely. Actually, that would be contracted out. That's a lot more work, I think, than our maintenance and operations crew wants to take on. So that's listed. Those are kind of the big ones under the regular 80%. Under learning loss, we supported the expanded summer school program last year. I anticipate that happening again next year. Also, our funding streams are changing with our 21st century programs. It was great. We were able to secure another after school program grant that might be able to support some additional outside of school time. So those are just estimates. We'll kind of see as things go. Certified staff time to support additional direct contact and direct support to students that are behind grade level. Oh, that's classified staff, sorry. Certificated staff are listed down below as well. During the budget presentations, we were talking about, staffing and really supporting those lower class sizes to, support students coming out of the pandemic. So that's included there as well. That's really kind of an evolving category as we go through and really trying to address the needs the best that we can for schools and for students, and really thinking hard about what does that look like? What's the best for students that we can support operationally? After school program and the tutoring program. So the tutoring, which is in collaboration with the 21st century programs that are already existing. So that's included for 21-22 school year and 22-23 school year. And then additional support to hopefully help continue the 21st century grant programs that are ending over the next couple of years. So those are the big things. That was a lot.
2 questions. So this presentation is all of our CARES money. We've accounted for and proposed to allocate all of it right now. There's not other buckets sitting out there that we just don't know what to do with. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And then my only other question is, I know that the audit standards are intense on these things. Like, we all go to jail if we don't do it right. So the one that jumps out at me on this particular page is the equity and access audit. And I'm just curious how we're tying that to a COVID eligible expense.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that's actually listed in the CARES 3, I think it's technically called the ARP grant, is really looking at accessibility for students, and really, looking at, are your students with disabilities able to access the curriculum that they need? Are your students, minority students able to access, your migratory students? Really looking at, mostly the curriculum and student access piece, which is going to be a huge focus of the work of that. We call it an audit, but it's more like a review, really, an outside entity coming in to really help us look at our opportunities and our strengths as well, to really be able to, make sure that we're providing the support to students that we should be, and providing that equal access. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, you said it well, and I would just talk from the broader perspective. Again, a good question. The piece that the lenses that we're using is always that framework that Jeanette's talking about from the federal government as to what falls in those criteria, and really Jeanette, Karen, and the finance team vet each one of those against any of the ideas or thoughts that were brought forward. So we do a strong vetting, and I will tell you, our CFO, Jeanette, is very comfortable saying no to the superintendent and to others when they don't, because she, from day one of the CARES Act, she was very clear with cabinet and others that these will be highly audited. Not that we would ever do anything because it wasn't being audited, but these are highly audited dollars, and that we're going to take incredible care to spend these federal dollars in the way that they were intended to support students, staff, and our facilities in the right way. And they're doing a great job, and huge kudos to Jeanette and Karen, and I know the rest of the team, but those two take on a large, heavy burden in making sure that each one of these are vetted and vetted well.
I
Thank
was
you. That's
saving up my
the
comments.
assurance. Yeah.
Okay. I was saving, am I coming through? Okay. Yeah. I was saving all my comments to bundle them at the end. Jeanette, this is the kind of report that I was looking for. So thank you very much. It's very helpful. As I look at it, it obviously is, you can see the necessity of different lead times. Ron's mentioned supply chain delays. There's a design implementation. Sometimes you've got to find somebody to install it. So these things are going in a rolling evolution as you go, with the further out, more uncertainty. And that's exactly what I would expect to see, and makes sense. The big question I have, and I don't expect an answer, but a recognition, is in multiple places, you see a plan, a target, they make sense. And the big question is, where are we going to find the staffing to do it on time? I think that's something we need to recognize. And where I would follow up from that is say, it'd be a very good idea to do a progress report, and I don't know how long, where we see where we have been delayed, where we are short of staff, what we've been able to do, if we've had to adapt and adjust a little bit. And I would appreciate a little bit of comment on how we view that management problem as we go forward.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the supply chain, it's a matter of us ordering earlier. Ron and I were just talking about technology and some of the technology that we're hoping to have in place next school year, and ordering that before Christmas. And so, a lot of it is timing, and I have to, I think cabinet's kind of used to me and my crazy ideas that they're probably like, oh my gosh, Jeanette, really? But I throw some out there, like staggered deliveries for products and things like that, which helps our staff to be able to manage set up and install of certain things. So, we're looking at creative solutions for that. We are fortunate enough to have a warehouse. So we, hopefully are going to be able to store some of those, things for big bulk orders. you know, staffing is a challenge. You know, obviously it depends on what type of thing that we're talking about. Subs are a challenge to find. We are finding ways around it. Kelly and Katie have been great with their creativity to help support buildings to, you know, get subs in the building to help cover classes. Even then, there are still not enough to go around. But, you know, we're hopeful that we can continue that to support that this year and alleviate some of that stress, really give people some consistent work, which I think a lot of people appreciate. I would also say, you know, some of the staff challenges are just, you know, we have to mold with what we have. And I think that's one of the things that school employees are great about, is stepping up to the plate and, you know, taking on things that aren't necessarily their jobs. So, you know, I think we can manage. Obviously, you know, if we had a never ending line of applicants out the door, we could probably do a lot more. But, you know, we're trying. We've ramped up our advertising. Diana has been doing awesome about that, trying to, you know, really get the word out for our open positions, because there are quite a few of them.
I do want to come back to you a little bit on that, because I think the supply chain and the things you first talked about are the more controllable ones. I think the uncontrollable one is staffing. And I would throw out as a potential example, tutoring in the after school. We're having a tough time with subs. And I would say the after school is following time-wise, probably more delayed than subs. We are not by ourselves in a national economy with a labor shortage. My own personal opinion is I don't think we really know how much progress we're going to make. Obviously you're doing, and your staff are doing everything you can, but that's why I talked about doing a progress report, because we may find we just don't have enough qualified people or recruitable people to do our agenda, and then how we're going to handle that.
Yeah, Martin, that's a great idea, and we will mark it down maybe in every other month where Jeanette and I come back to the board, because I think that's enough timeline to be able to see where are we at on different areas of hiring to the supply chain and making some adjustments to the plan. So yeah, it's a great idea to have this on a regular basis with the board, especially around CARES 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And every other month might even be a little more frequent than I was thinking. Quarterly might work. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll start in that, 2 months out.
Maybe for the first cut. Yeah.
Yeah. And then see if if there's really any significant change in that point in time, and then we can extend if we feel like we need more time. So yeah, we'll add that. Jeanette and I will add that to the regular cadence.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Jeanette, for a very thorough presentation of our CARES Act dollars. I think we all have a much better understanding of where the dollars are being used, and your work is very much appreciated. Any other questions for Jeanette?
I just hope that the CARES dollars don't give Jeanette nightmares at night. Just kind of seeing the whole presentation with all the work that's gone into it. Jeanette, thank you to you and all your team members. You guys have, you guys have thought of so many different things to help meet our student and staff needs during COVID. So I hope it doesn't give you nightmares, but this was a great presentation. Thank you.
Might get some gray hairs, but I haven't lost sleep over it too much yet.
Just
Good to
wait
hear.
till the audits are done.
Yeah, it's true.
And Jeanette will be back with us a little bit later on the contract piece. So she's not done with us yet.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, moving along in the agenda next we are having a discussion amongst the board members regarding in-person or remote board meetings. At the last meeting, it was discussed, and the plan moving forward was that I, as the chair, would reach out to the folks who were specifically mentioned in the Craigslist threat that was received, and I did do so and report back to the superintendent. In making his calls to individual board members, the topic came up of having this placed on the agenda for public discussion. And we do have a policy that whenever one board member requests that an item be placed on the agenda, we do so. So it is here this evening. And so is there anybody that would like to kick off this discussion?
I guess I'll just say that when I spoke to Paul, I understood that we were going to review how the comfort level, at minimum for this meeting. It was mentioned that the decision had been made to move all meetings to virtual until November, and to me that felt a little aggressive without really having the opportunity just to kind of come back as a board and talk about it. I thought Martin's proposal of taking it week by week was a good one. I do feel like we do have some obligation. I mean, we have an open meetings regulation that requires really in-person meetings with online meetings being sort of the exception allowed under these COVID times. I do not discount the concerns and fears, and so all I'm proposing or would be on board for exploring is some type of hybrid meeting if there's enough support for it, because I do think we get a better outreach to our public. We have more diverse comments, we have more diverse audience participation. We haven't seen much of the Latino representation that we had received previously when we were in person. So I continue to hear folks challenged with getting on to the online, signing up to comment, even though comments are not necessarily required. This isn't all about commenting. This is just kind of about fulfilling our purpose of doing our business in person. Like I said, I don't know where investigations and things are. The only information I have is that our chief of police has kind of said they've done all that they can do. So, take that as the lens I am kind of looking at as well. It feels a little quieter to me. I'm aware that Eastmont continues to do in-person meetings. So I wanted to just explore whether that meeting by meeting basis in deciding whether we can go in person, and recognizing that in person would mean under mandates. If anyone shows up not in compliance with mandates, we immediately pull the trigger and go online, that kind of format. So, we're not able, like I said last time, to have a conversation outside this forum. So I think the hope was in being prepared, seeing it on the agenda, it would not be construed as any, as putting anybody on the spot. So it was just to be able to have this conversation, because I think Paul didn't feel comfortable also, without more support from the board, making that the final decision, at least in my conversation. So this was just to explore whether there are folks that are interested in doing that, and being completely respectful and mindful that online would remain an option as needed.
Julie, I'm wondering, at the last in-person meeting that we had, I would like you to comment on your proposal at that meeting to excuse the staff and have the board remain in the room with a group full of unmasked audience members. Could you please comment about that?
Sure. So what I did there was a very isolated, meant to be a practical solution in that situation. And what I suggested, because I did not dispute that the mandates apply to our staff, to our persons, to our meeting. I did not dispute that the mandates apply. And perhaps my motion was not very clear, and the reason that excusing the staff was because I know our staff can't be in the presence of unmasked and we're not supposed to have them there. Where I was at in doing that is we had conversations with Ron about, we don't know if we can get things back online, and we were in a meeting in progress. My hope was that because we were in what I construed as a protest in a public forum, for lack of a better term, which in some cases was sort of exempt from mandates. I'm not saying it is exempt from mandates, but didn't necessarily mean that we were in violation of a mandate. It was really meant to be a practical solution in that moment. It didn't mean to say that I don't think we have to comply with mandates, but it was really meant to, I think if we just settle this, things will calm down. We can finish our meeting, especially with for the moment, uncertainty of being able to continue a meeting online. We could settle it. Clearly it got more disruptive, but that was the intent. The intent was never that I don't believe that they apply to us. It was excuse the staff because they apply to us. And then we're in a public forum with a protest, which is a constitutional right in some ways. So how do we manage that? Clearly, now that we've had planning and ability to set a protocol, we follow the protocol, no questions asked.
Does that mean that you've changed your perspective on protest in a public space? Or would that still be an okay thing for you to do?
No, I think now we have clearly set our message that we will not tolerate this. I think the statement is too broad. I think protest is protest everywhere, but I think if protest is going to occur, it can occur outside the building with picketing and whatever.
Sure.
I am saying if we have a public meeting, we will follow the mandate. So if anyone comes in to try and do that protest, we now have a protocol where we have clearly articulated that if you do that, we will not have a meeting.
Okay.
And I'm hopeful that people will be receptive because they would rather be in person and see us making that move than go through that, because there are other ways. I recognize there's other ways. I'm not saying that was the way to do it. I'm just saying in that moment, we had no real protocols ahead of time announced. We didn't have a situation where law enforcement was likely to be able to remove anybody. We had a meeting sort of in process. It seemed like the practical approach to go. Like I said, it clearly escalated a little bit more. And so we were forced to adjourn online. I think having the protocols going forward makes it very clear that that's not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you for
And that
that
is my hope.
clarification. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Don't all jump at once.
I actually wanted to listen to the people who were most affected first, but I'll step in right now. I'm going to begin by stepping back and taking stock a little bit, and starting with who we are and why we're around at a board meeting. School boards are nonpartisan. We're supposed to act independently without forming any coordinated factions. And when we had the disorderly meeting, there were leaders who organized that and furthermore said that they wanted to do it again. We're a collegiate board. We're a governing board. There are 5 of us. We make decisions by consensus or majority vote. And then once that's done, we act supportively. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not unique in Wenatchee in this fairly rough situation we've been in the last 6 weeks. So in terms of what we wish to aspire to, I'm going to read some stuff from the Washington State School Directors Association, a document that they put out. And I'm going to begin with the last sentence. It is time to restore civility to our schools and our communities and find a way to move forward together. And, you know, that I'm not talking about so much what's wrong, but where we would like to be and how do we get there. One of the things that the association, and this is our industry association, it is not partisan. We used mostly their policies for our policies. And this is another extract that I want to take from that. It is important for families to have their voices heard. However, it is equally important to do so in a way that sets an example for students of how to advocate in a civil and respectful manner. This was actually a joint communique with the Association of School Principals, and they said the same kind of thing about adult examples, but in tougher words. Then the other thing that we have as a backdrop is we will not tolerate threats of violence, whether in person or online. This behavior has no place in our schools. So that's where we'd like to be. It would be very nice if everyone urged that message publicly as a solid board. No silences. I would pause now. I do have what I think is a position, but I would be very happy to let other board members speak first, and then I would move on.
I'll go next just because to give Maria and Michelle a chance to hear from everyone else. So I really appreciate you bringing up the letter from WASDA and Wausau Martin regarding civility, because it's exactly what I believe needs to return to our public discourse in all kinds of areas, every area really. We see that this is not a local problem. It's not even a statewide problem. It's a national problem, and perhaps even worldwide. That the idea of civil discourse and agreeing to disagree has devolved into an atmosphere where threats of violence have seemed to become the norm. And if we allow ourselves to be subjected to communications that come to us in that form, then in my mind, we are enabling that. And I am not interested in being an enabler of people who threaten or are, intentional about perpetrating violence. Did I believe that most of the people in that room were capable or interested in doing that? No, absolutely not. I think that for the most part, the people in the room came with peaceful intentions and committed to a belief that they wanted to demonstrate about publicly. And so I do appreciate that not everybody came to the meeting with violent intent. There was some unrest. There was catcalling and one instance of a person approaching the board in a very angry manner, which was a little bit scary. And we're unprotected. And I don't want to subject myself nor any of my colleagues to behavior that is potentially going to harm them or me, either physically or emotionally. We have had communications from Chief Crown, who supported our decision to go to online. And he recommended that continue for some period of time. Our superintendent also met with our safety and security directors at the North Central Educational Service District. This is a service that we pay for as a district. And those folks advised that going virtual until after the elections was a good idea. I don't, when we have people who are experts in law enforcement or safety and security or any other, we have experts in education, far be it from me to counteract or contradict what those experts are coming forward and telling us. We've been advised that it's a good idea, it's a prudent decision to continue with online virtual meetings until after the election period. So that being said, I would support that. On the other hand, if we had a strong consensus on the board that, it was very important to continue with in-person meetings, I'd be willing to do that, with the caveat that as soon as, something went against the mandates or out of control or seemed threatening, that we would be done immediately and go back to online. One other thing I'll mention is that if we do that, we're not going to do that without extra security measures put in place. And that means having people at the door, having, certain, door checks and, inviting people to wear masks and so on. And that's going to be expensive. It's going to take money away from, direct student spending, which is where I really think we should be putting our money. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Laura and Martin. I'll just go ahead and chime in with my 2 cents as one of the people who was named in the Craigslist threat. I have children that still live at home. I was a bit surprised, Julie, when you made it an item for that you brought it up during board communication. I appreciate that Laura reached out to both Maria and I to discuss our thoughts on it, and Martin had reached out earlier. So I feel like that threat, even though we're not getting active daily threats, it still concerns me. And I would agree that I don't know if things will calm down until after the election. I mean, that's kind of the big elephant in the room, right? So my comfort level would be that we wait until the election is done, and then we let folks know that we're going to come back if that seems to be right, if there's no threats going on, but let the people vote and we'll see kind of where it goes. That would be my inclination. And frankly, I'm a little surprised, Julie. I know you're married to a law enforcement officer. I would have thought that you might take this a little more seriously. The fact that 2 of your colleagues' lives were threatened in a very brief internet message, but still important enough to raise eyebrows and for the chief of police to recommend we continue online. I also found it interesting that while you were on vacation, you wanted to come back in person. So I have no problem with people going on vacation. I go on vacation myself, but I found it rather interesting that you wanted to come back to in person at this meeting. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share. Also, I believe that Eastmont hasn't received threats. So yes, they are continuing in person. But I believe there are still a number of schools that have continued online who have received threats or have had disruptive behavior at board meetings. I'm not actively following headlines in our state, but I know that nationally it has become an issue. It has been referred to the Department of Justice, as probably everyone is aware. And it's a serious issue. And I appreciate, Laura, that you said that I really don't want to condone that behavior by giving people another chance to act out. I do take that behavior of threatening people very seriously. I'm very disappointed in whoever did it. And I hope that it won't happen again for anyone. I've never been threatened in my life before in terms of that someone was going to come after me. Doesn't feel so good. And I would hope that anybody who's not had that experience could empathize with that.
For me, I'm going to share what I shared with Laura and Paul when I spoke with them over the phone last week. As I mentioned at the last week's meeting or 2 weeks ago, I initially mentioned that I don't have a problem going back to face-to-face meeting. However, these, I would expect zero tolerance for unmasked attendees, have a process a process as to what would happen if one person in that room chose to remove their mask. And then the second part was, the security, the safety concern, the setup of our room, having that additional safety in the boardroom. And then the other one was it touches on what Martin said that I had mentioned to Paul and Laura, who we are. For me, we are a unified board, and having one person not feel safe enough to be in face-to-face instruction should be enough to make the decision for the board as a whole. Because for me, for my colleagues to feel safe in the environment of this public service is really important, whether it's me, whether it's Laura, Martin, Julie, Michelle. If there's one of us that does not feel safe, then it shouldn't be a question of whether we're going to do hybrid or in person. To me, that's just not showing who we are and a united front. Another thing that I mentioned was having our legal counsel there at the last board meeting where this interruption happened. There was, we needed that counsel from district representative that knows the ins and outs of the district, Open Public Meeting Act, and that represents the district. I know Julie tried to guide us through that process. However, as a board member, there's a fine line between your role as a board member and as an attorney. So those were my pieces of conversation that I had with Paul and Laura. However, after hearing the conversation just now, there are things that do concern me. Having virtual meetings are not a violation of Open Public Meeting Act as it stands. Okay, so I'm not sure what the concern is, Julie, in regards to saying that we're not complying with Open Public Meeting Act by being virtual. We are, because the proclamation allows. The other thing that is concerning to me is to hear Julie say that we were not in violation of the mandate. However, the proclamation specifically states that any government entity, the proclamation specifically states that any government entity is prohibited from having a meeting with face covering. As an attorney, I would hope that you were
Can
aware.
you leave me just being an attorney out, please? I'm
basing it on what you said. And Paul had shared the proclamation with the board in advance after this change was made. So that's what's concerning to me, to say that there was no violation of the mask mandate. And hearing that
I didn't say that.
Office is, let me speak, please. The district office is actually considered a public, a government building, whether it's a school or not, it is. And so anyways, that to me, it was concerning after this discussion, hearing this part of this discussion. And then, the recommendation of the security team at the ESD, they have very highly qualified professionals, that is what they do. Part of the election, I wasn't thinking about going remote with the election until the election is over, but now looking back and hearing all of this, we do have candidates that specifically said, there'll be 10 times more of us at the next board meeting. So again, that just kind of highlights that I guess not necessarily a threat, but the momentum, I guess, that is going on with the whole campaign, the campaigning season. So again, it goes back to we are, a unified front. I don't believe that the option of a hybrid board meeting should be considered, because, that is just, we are a board. And the concerns after the comments that were made. So that's where I stand.
Okay.
I would like to jump in because I need to defend myself, and B, need to respond to a couple things. First and foremost, I did immediately jump out on social media and say I do not tolerate or stand for the threats. I made that as public as I possibly could, that is unacceptable. So I hope you saw that. I hope you were aware of that. I immediately did that. Second,
that was never communicated to me from you, Julie. I actually brought it up at last board's meeting, the lack of empathy or approach from a few of our board members.
It's been there since that day. It seems like everyone else knows what I'm doing on social media. So, I didn't know how else to convey it. I can't send multiple messages, I'm mindful of open meetings. So I did jump out right away and say that it's unacceptable, not tolerated at all. As far as, I never said that being unmasked at the meeting was not in violation of the mandate. I know well that we as the district are required to follow the mandates. Whether agree or disagree with them, I know we have to follow them. I know we have to follow them in the board meeting. I know that's a government building. What is unique about that context, and at that moment, and if we could go back, maybe it would have happened a different way. But in that particular moment, without having hashed all these security plans in advance, and what do we do? And again, recognizing that the mandate had sort of only just taken effect that day. I did not dispute that we had to comply with it. What was challenging in that moment, and that's again why I excused staff. So don't put this narrative out there that I didn't think it applied. It applied. I get that. I was masked the whole time. It applied. Where I struggled in that moment is we're in a public forum, which is not our school building, where we know we're not going to allow anybody in if they don't have a mask on, and we have more authority to trespass, exclude from a school building during school time is in that forum when we're a board in an open public meeting space. Yes, it's a government building, but it's an open public meeting. It's kind of like a public forum, as you will. A group showed up wanting to exercise their First Amendment right to be unmasked. I'm not saying that was, I'm saying it wasn't compliant with the mandate. I agree. It was not compliant with the mandate. What do you do in that moment when they're exercising a First Amendment right in a public forum? We did go back and call district legal counsel about how to get through the meeting. I do not want my legal reputation continue to be brought up. I'm not the board's attorney. I bring some of that background in how I interpret and review policies, but maybe we should be having the district's attorney at all of these meetings. I specifically say I'm not the board's attorney. I'm in some ways in that moment making more of a practical recommendation, understanding from my background that we've got a public forum with a protest occurring in a public forum. And so everybody's got some rights here. And we didn't have the OSPI funding throwdown that happened the next day to make it very clear that, okay, it is much easier for me now to say, yeah, we can't do this. And again, we didn't have a protocol in place to be able to exclude somebody. So, and we know law enforcement isn't going to be the mask police and come in and do it. So we're stuck in this room with a lot of people. My practical solution at the time to continue a meeting that we didn't know if we could get back online before the first day of school was to say, hey, they're exercising their First Amendment right. Maybe if we continue this meeting, if the board as volunteer members of the public are comfortable, want to continue this meeting, we can get through it, get their comments out, and maybe they leave peacefully and go. It was more of a practical decision than anything. To be honest, somebody could have jumped out way before me and made a motion to say, hey, adjourn. There was silence, there was an opportunity. So I wanted the public to see in some ways a process, a discussion between the board, why we could or couldn't do it. Unfortunately, it was not articulated very well, and I'll take some responsibility for that. And it was cut short because of continued disruptions. So it was altogether a sort of messy, confusing situation that we tried the best to salvage. We did. You were in the room when we called the district's attorney. So I don't want to be, I don't want this dumped on me. Like, like it's my legal advice because I'm not the district's attorney, and I'm tired of it constantly being innuendoed that I'm making these as legal decisions on behalf of the board, or shame on you, or I mean, it's not fair. I don't go after your professions. It's below the belt. It's uncalled for, and I just would like it to not be part of the conversation. I'm trying to be as understanding. I am sympathetic entirely to the threats and the concerns. Maybe because I'm married to law enforcement, I perceive them a different way. Maybe because of my background in public meetings, I'm a little desensitized to tense meetings. So I apologize if that's seeming insincere. I really do mean the best for all of you. And I actually would like to be in the same room with you all again, because I think we get along well. I think different perspectives are great. And that was part of why I like the idea of trying to get in person if we can. I never said that being virtual would violate any kind of law. I know that they're expressly allowed. I never said that. I said the default rule is that you're supposed to be in public. We have these virtual options now as exceptions because of COVID. I don't particularly like constantly relying on an exception if we're supposed to do things a particular way. I'm not saying it's a violation to continue online meetings. I'm just saying that we're supposed to be in public if there's enough interest in doing it. That's great. I think our public appreciates that. I think we get, like, as I said before, I think we get better audience participation. Things can be communicated clearer. I know we've seen comments about people, yeah, it is hard right now because we have masks on and you can't really hear, but I think our collaboration as a board is potentially better in person as well. So those were my thoughts. It's not ever meant to be insensitive or anything. It's just to have a conversation. I was uncomfortable with a duration. I appreciate the advice from our experts. I'm willing to follow if that's the will of the board. I have no issue. From where I sit, seems like things had significantly calmed down. But again, I'm not in your shoes, and I understand and appreciate that. And I can't have those conversations with you outside this context. So it's, or with everybody. So unfortunately, it's the only way to sort of do it. So that was just.
Thank you, Julie. I mean, we do have one, way of communicating, and that's through the superintendent. So, that is an option. Our superintendent weekly shares emails that each of us sends to him, and, with questions. So, that is one potential option. I also wanted to remind you that on August 26th, the communication from WASDA regarding future virtual meetings says that offering in-person component to a board meeting is optional, whereas offering a virtual component is required. So there is nothing, and this is reading directly, for nothing prevents school boards from holding board meetings in an entirely virtual manner, which avoids disruptions over face coverings. So it's not a second best having a virtual, it's totally allowed, and actually the virtual piece is required.
I'm not disputing that it's not allowed. I don't know that that's the way WASDA phrased it, though, is actually how the proclamations go. But I don't dispute that it's totally allowed, and in some of these tense contexts, likely encouraged. I don't dispute that at all.
I think what you said, though, was that under OPMA that an in-person meeting is preferred. So I think because we're in a pandemic, there are exceptions, and Laura just read why there are exceptions, that actually virtual is required and in-person is not. It is optional. I do want to talk about one thing. So the mandate, if we're going to talk about not having staff step out of the room, like your motion at that meeting, but the mandate actually applied to everyone in the room because we were all indoors. So again, if we're following rules and mandates, it doesn't really follow the mandate if you just excuse the staff to step outside of the room where we're having a public meeting. So, and one final thing I just want to bring up, after that meeting occurred, it was shared with me, and I don't have a screenshot, but I'm sure someone else does, that someone from the Unmask Our Kids group, which was the group that primarily showed up at that late August meeting, somebody had asked where the meeting was, and somebody had said, oh, it's at Orchard. And you actually corrected them on social media and said, no, it's at the district building. So, you know, I get that maybe you were just doing your duty as a school board member, but maybe you weren't so surprised that there was a large group that showed up with that.
No,
and,
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I would absolutely love this opportunity to sort of clear the air. What you are referring to is a screenshot that I have now seen of somebody who I don't know posting on it was posted on a parent Facebook group and I don't even remember the one, but a parent Facebook group. And it talked about encouraging folks to show up to the meeting to speak about items on the agenda, supposedly. And I actually was surprised to see, and I read this very quickly because I was working and doing other things. And I just it's the weirdest circumstance that happened to see it, but I saw it. And it was talking about showing up to speak about these various topics. And the post itself said that the meetings happen at Orchard. And first I was confused why it was mentioning the various topics that were mentioned, because I didn't recall them being on the agenda and actually had to go back and look at my agenda. But what just jumped out right at me, didn't pay much attention, don't know who the person was that it said something about Orchard. So I just didn't want parents. I expected that we would have a crowd at this meeting like we had a crowd at the other meeting. I thought I was doing an appropriate thing, just saying, hey, the board meets at Orchard. So I replied on my personal Facebook and said, board meets at Orchard. Don't know who it was. I don't know them to be this person. You seem to know more about them than I do. I don't know who they are. All I know is I responded to something that said, meetings are at Orchard. It jumped out at me, the meetings are at Orchard. So I said, okay, meetings are meetings are across the street. It was a few words at the most. My understanding is it was taken down. How a screenshot has been circulated for days and months and weeks, I don't know. It was the most coincidental thing I could possibly imagine. Like I said, I don't know who it was. I've learned all kinds of things after the fact. I had no idea that anything would occur at the meeting that was other than people would show up like they did the meeting before to speak on the agenda. I had no reason to know. If I did, I've talked to Laura and Paul both. I would have absolutely suggested to Paul or Laura that we take another route for the meeting. I had no idea at all. It is the most coincidental thing. I'm not affiliated with any of these groups. I do not know who the person was. I know it was promptly removed. It has somehow been circulated since that time by screenshot. That's as good as it gets. I would have absolutely given advance notice if I thought anything would go awry. I don't want to put you all in that position, and I don't want to put law enforcement that may be required to respond in any uncomfortable position. It just absolutely, it's not conducive to getting work of the board done, and it made for an uncomfortable dynamic. I know that we were subject to the mandate at that meeting. What I said before is we were stuck with a situation where the staff that are our staff that we are responsible for, we can excuse them. I can't necessarily, even if they're required to be masked, excuse a member of the public. I could say, hey, you get out of here without a mask. And if they, what occurred in that moment is that they wanted to protest and not do that. Again, my hope and sort of practical advice, because of how things unfolded, was that if we continued in some way, the protest would not shut us down. We would get our business done. Things would quiet down. They might say their piece and get out, but we would get on with it in a civil manner. I had nothing to do with it. I have gained nothing from it. I do not know who all or any of the people that were involved are.
You had a nice round of applause when you left that night, didn't you? I'm just going to say that I'm uncomfortable with coming back to in-person meetings, given our current community vibe. And I know it's not an action item, but that's where I'm going to leave for myself. And I believe that our public has access. They have a Spanish speaking channel. We have English speaking in the meetings, and everybody is welcome to do public comment from their devices. So I am most comfortable right now continuing our meetings through October in a virtual fashion. I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay.
Laura, I want to be transparent, and I'll try to be fairly short on this one about the logic behind my preferences. I'm not a person who's been named any threat, but I want to make clear that I consider any threat to one of my board colleagues to be a threat to all of us. And what I think is even more important, that it's a threat to our whole board process. The second thing, these are the logic points that reach my endpoint. Not being a candidate, I'm not a campaign target, so that makes life easy for me. Looking at the level of threat, I don't have reliable information about the likelihood of a word threat going further and becoming violent, or of a repetition of disorderly behavior at in-person meetings. I have read the security advice from the experts that assisted us through the ESD, the district. And I want to add one other thing that wasn't in my list. I happened by coincidence to be scheduled to preside over the 9/14 meeting when Laura was away. And that was the one where we had elaborate preparation for a meeting that would be safe in person when we didn't know what would happen. And it was awkward, incomplete, and very difficult to do. So I don't want to underestimate the situation that you step into. Personally, I welcome civic input, and in a perfect world would love the meetings to be in person. But when I add everything together with that logic and knowing that I'm not a person who is particularly threatened and recognizing the importance of my colleagues, under present conditions, I do support the recommendation to continue with remote meetings. So you know where I stand.
Thank you, Martin. Okay.
As I said before, if any one of us feels like we need to continue remote, I will support that as well and stand behind, because again, we are a unified front.
Okay. So that was another robust discussion. And for the most part, a demonstration of civil discourse. And I do appreciate everybody setting that example for our students and in our community. I heard at least one person say that they were not comfortable returning to in-person meetings before the election. And I agree with the concept of unity. If one person on the board is threatened, then we all are threatened. And so what I'm hearing is that there's support for that. And what I'm hearing is, since there is that support, that we are intending to operate virtually until after the November election. Is anybody that disputes my interpretation of the conversation? Okay. All right. Thank you. So moving on, we have next an action item on secretary, paraprofessional, professional, and technical collective bargaining agreement approval.
Yeah, tonight I want to recognize the secretaries, para-educators, professionals, and technical support for their team coming forward and working with our negotiation team, the administrative negotiation team, to come to this agreement. We on both sides feel like it's a very fair agreement and one that we're bringing forward to the board. If the board had any questions outside of the memo, Jeanette or I are here for those questions before the board takes action. All right, Laura, back to you then.
No questions from me, but again, I appreciate the team on, the staff side and the administrative side, that sat at the table and worked through these issues. The board does not participate in those discussions, but that we know that from reports back from our team that they can be very intense circumstances, and as far as I know, also a good example of civil discourse. And so just want to appreciate everybody's work on that, those agreements. So thank you. This is an action item. So is there a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement as presented?
I move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the school district and the Association of Public Employees, Local 1948. That's term of the agreement is September 1, 21 through August 31, 23, as presented in the package.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Go ahead.
Okay. One of you seconded.
Maria did.
Maria is first. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll be doing a roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
And Laura is aye as well. So that motion passes. Thank you. So now we come to board communication. We had a lot of board discussion already. Could there be anything left in board communication that needs to be shared with the rest?
As always, just quick, I'll make it quick. I attended the migrant PAC meeting last week, and it was super well attended. It was awesome to, like Laura said, have back some events that are, somewhat normal. I was impressed by the show of support from parents, from teachers, administrators, the students. The mariachi was playing, the bailadores were there. Good information. Nadia Bush and team did an amazing job, and the food was delicious as well. But yeah, kudos to Special Programs Department and all the parents and students that attended that event. And I also wanted to do a quick shout out. It kind of goes with Brian Higgins' point in regards to while I was at that event and just at a Wenatchee event that I attended this weekend, and talking to teachers in the district. Everybody that I've talked to has expressed how difficult this school year has been. It's been so challenging because of all the ins and outs, the different modalities of instruction that they're having to deal with. And, regardless of that, they're pushing through, they're making it the best experience for our students while, working in this world of unknowns. And so I just want to send a big shout out to them and just let them know that their work doesn't go unseen. Paul shared an email today of all the different things that different grade levels are doing to really accommodate the students that are, for whatever reason, being quarantined. And that's on top of what they're already doing every day in the classroom. So big shout out to all the teachers and the paras, as well as our food service, transportation, and administrators. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
I'll just add on to what Maria said. I think our staff are doing more with less. We know we have a lot less staff, and we have more things that we've placed on them. Social distancing, lots of things. I'm not going to go through the list, but I so appreciate not just our educators, but all our staff who are coming to work every day, and we need more. So please apply. And just also on that PAC event, it was wonderful. And it was the first time they've been back since COVID started, I was told. So it was a really great event. It was really wonderful to see all the families and the kids and all the vendors who were sharing their information to families. So it was a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Very good. Anyone else? Julie?
Maybe, I guess, related to conversations I've had in my own experiences as a parent. I know Martin requested sort of that update on the CARES funding, where we're at progress-wise. I'm wondering if we can get an update on recovery plan progress. I know we should be hitting the end of our testing period that we were hoping for. Can we get updates periodically of how does that look? I know we've had resource shortages. I know, somebody just said it, that we're doing more with less. And so but I know that means some of our intervention and specialist teachers that we had hoped would be spending more time. I'm hoping we're finding ways around those challenges and that we're staying on target with what we're hoping. So it would be nice to see, I think, some updates and progress reports on how's it looking? What is the baseline right now based on testing? How's it looking with our resource allocation? How are we measuring the progress? If we can kind of get some check-ins.
Yep, Laura and I spoke about that today. We'll have a workshop in November, kind of all the testing, trying to get teachers through the parent-teacher conferences, and then learning, teaching, myself will present to the board in November that some of that academic data that we're talking about, the current data and how it looked in previous years. So yeah, Laura and I talked about that this morning. And then in December, we'll come back with the board with a professional learning communities conversation. As you saw in the CARES, spending some fairly significant dollars there to ensure that the board really has a deep understanding of how those dollars impact us and the incredible importance behind professional learning communities and our work to ensure that that is lifted up. So yes, those two things are on our radar, and they'll be on the board's radar in workshops. So we'll literally dedicate roughly about an hour and a half to that conversation in that November meeting.
I'm excited about that. Paul and I were talking today, he's saying, one of the normal things that's missing for me is in-depth discussion about student data. When do we get to do that? So here we are in November, and I'm really looking forward to it, and digging into what do we need to do to make us even better. Okay, any other board members? Okay, Superintendent Report.
Just on that theme of how do we continue to improve, just hearkening back to board members, remember there was a time when COVID wasn't impacting us to this level, and learning teaching came to the board and really talked to the board about structured literacy and our literacy work that we were implementing. That continued. I got to tell you, Friday was one of those really good days as a superintendent in the afternoon, because one of the things that we've been trying to lift up are our educators and those who are truly reaching a high level of expertise in certain areas of their content pedagogical knowledge. And we demonstrated that on Friday afternoon by a number of our teachers leading structured literacy instruction for their peers It was fantastic, and huge shout out to the entire learning and teaching department, but Sarah Wall for leading that work, reaching out to our staff, asking them what they needed in the area of structured literacy and others. But our teachers really talking to us about where are they struggling from that K1, that 2 through 5, and then our team, our teachers leading that work. So I just want to recognize a number of people who really made Friday afternoon happen. And that's Teresa Hines, Allison Hurt, Bailey Garinger, Renee Wilkins, Jill Reinfeld, Angie Jagla, Desiree Schmidt, Courtney Holland, Sarah Lefebvre, Shane Rennie for assisting in the planning, Tim Shepard and Jeff Jager for making sure that we had access into our buildings and making sure that our staff were safe, and then Tina Herring for supporting us with technology. But we really talked a lot about lifting up our educators and our educators taking the baton and being leaders and supporting their colleagues. And that's what Friday afternoon was. It was, for me, one of those really great opportunities, and how they had it structured where they were delivering content, but then in the second half, allowing educators to work as a collaborative core team of first grade teachers or third grade teachers to really plan lessons. So our teachers walked away ready to go for their Monday back in class. It really was outstanding. The secondary schools were really focused in their professional learning communities, really getting teachers together to plan, to do the things that we're going to talk to the board about in December. So I was incredibly pleased, but I wanted to highlight staff members who are leading the charge to transform instruction that will make a significant difference in the lives of our students. And we believe in the work of our structured literacy. So we'll keep highlighting different teacher leaders and staff leaders who continue to step forward and support their colleagues. That's it for me, Laura.
Very nice. Thank you. So just a brief reminder to the board meeting members that we normally have paperwork that at the end of the meeting we pass around and sign when we are in person. So this means that each of you needs to take a trek to the district office to see Kim at some point in the next few days to sign the appropriate paperwork. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. We have canceled our Monday workshop, so the next time we are together will be the 26th of October. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night.